Hello, I'm Mark, and welcome to the final part of my three-part video series on how to make a data-driven and dynamic spawn controller for your Unreal Engine games. So, as always, I like to start these things with a quick little recap of what we did in the previous parts. So, let's get to it. So, in part one, it was all things data structures. So, first off, we defined our table system that we're going to be using to load in our scenarios. So with that, we created this spawn scene actors structure, this spawned pawns structure, this spawned pawns group structure, and then finally we created our spawn scenario row table structure, which houses all of these subpieces. And then after that, we went and created our save and loading structures. So to do that, we created our spawn actor data structure, our spawned pawn data structure, and then we created our spawn controller scenario data structure. And this is the structure that will actually be sitting in that save file. All right, so once we did that, we then created a table just to test the structure, and then we created our save file. And then we moved on to part two, where we actually created the spawn controller. And we decided to create the spawn controller as an actor component. That way I can easily put this spawn controller into any existing actors that I may want to turn into a spawn controller. But you can also add this to characters or pawns, and it's up to you on where you want to place this. But here it is, and that was what we did in part two. I'm not going to go into it in great detail. If you want to know how to build it, I have left links in the description below. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and just minimize all of this, and let's get started with part three. So part three, everything we're going to do here is in blueprints at this point on. So we don't need the compiler. Everything should be working. I'm just going to do a quick little compile, make sure everything just recompiles. Alright, we're good to go. Alright, so also, before we get started, I did a little bit of housekeeping in here, and I created two quick little assets that we're going to be using for our spawn scenarios. The first one is just this table asset, and all it is just a couple of static actors, or a couple of static meshes sitting in an actor. So there's our tables. And I did one for this kind of this tree-like structure and a statue. So when just quickly built those out so that we have those when we start creating the scenarios. So now I'm just going to close this up. All right, so first let's go ahead and build that spawn controller host. So for that, I'm just going to come into my spawn folder here, Content Blueprint Spawners, and I'm going to right click and I'm going to come to Blueprints, and under Common I'm just going to go to Actor, and let's go ahead and just call this what it is, BP underscore, call it spawn host, and we're just going to open this up. Alright, so under default components, I'm just going to go ahead and put a static mesh. So I'm just going to go under components, say add, and find the static mesh. There it is. And I'm just going to pull in that rock. And I'm just going to go ahead and stamp it down. So if you want to stamp all three values down all at once, just turn this little lock on. And I'm just going to go 0.5, and then that will set it to 0.5 across all of these axes. Alright, so that's done. Alright, so now that we've got the rock in place, let's go ahead and add the spawn control components. So to do that, I'm just going to come back up to the blueprint. I'm going to come back under components, add, and let's go ahead and find it. And there it is, DY dynamic spawn. There it is. We're going to add it, hit compile, save. And there it is, spawn controller. And we're not going to do anything here. We're going to go and set this up in the actual instance of the spawner. So for now, we're just going to leave this as is. So next up, I want to create two lists of transform points, one for actors and one for pawns. And these are going to be the transforms that we can move around on the map so that we can create these spawn-in locations off the main actor. So to do that, I'm just going to come under variables, hit the little plus key, and I'm going to start with the actor transforms. There we go. And I'm just going to go ahead and change it. So right now it's a bool, so we want the transform. And I also want to make this an array. Next, I want to make this instance editable, which will make it public. And then I'm going to say show 3D widget. And I'm also going to put expose on spawn. So, and then hit compile and save. So now we have a transform array, and which when we add transforms in there, we can turn them into little widgets, so we can actually move those transforms around on the map. All right, finally, let's give it a subcategory so it's easy to find. And I'm just going to call it custom spawn points. All right, so that's the first one. So the second one is for the pawn transforms. So to do that, I'm just going to right click on the actor transforms, say duplicate, and I'm going to change it from actor to pawns. And it's got all the same settings. Just hit compile, save, and we're done. All right, so since we're using transforms, okay, the nice thing about transform is it has both the location, like a vector does, but it also has the rotation as well. So what we can do, and that allows us to actually make, create the ability to rotate in and give anything that we spawn in on a direction if we want to use the direction of the spawn in point. But since they are transforms and they are still points, it would be nice to know which direction these things are going in. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and add arrow components to each transform that we create within those transform arrays. So to do that, we're going to come under the constructor script right here, and we're just going to go ahead and iterate through each one of these lists and add a component to it. So to do that, I'm just going to pull off here and say for each. And I'm going to start with the actors. I'm going to use get, hook that into the array, park that up there, come off here, say add, and there's the arrow component there, and then take the transform there and put the transform in there. And I'm just going to go ahead and make that, I'll make it 50, and actors can stay red. Once this is complete, we'll pull off the complete, do another for loop, and this time I'm going to bring in our pawns. Oops, and I'm going to use the get, not the set. Hook that into the array, put that up top, and I'm just going to go copy, paste, that way it's got the same information in there as well. Drag, connect, and then within here, I'm just going to change its color to give it a nice yellow color. Hit compile, save, and that should be it for our transform points. All right. Next, let's go ahead and set up the logic. So within the event graph, we're not going to use actor overlap because we're managing the overlap system, the proximity through the component. And we don't need ticks because we're using the components tick. So the only thing we want here is begin play. So let's go ahead and set that up. All right. So first off, let's go and get the spawn. Let's load in the transforms. So we have two functions on our component. The first one is set custom actor spawn points. So on begin play, we're going to go ahead and set those. So all the points that was defined here are going to just be sucked in so that our spawn controller can use it. And then we'll do the same thing for all of our pawns. And again, just hook that up. And I'm just going to grab the pawns. Alright, I'm going to hit compile, save. Alright, next I'm going to just set up the bindings, since we have 2 event bindings. We have one for on spawn and one for on despawn. So let's set that up. Bind event spawn. Alright, set those up, connect those to the execution flow, and then since these are dispatchers, event dispatchers, we need to tie it to an event, so I'm just going to go ahead and add a custom event. This one's on spawn, and this one will be on despawn. And then I'm just going to make it simple and just do a print string. So that's that one. Yeah. All right. Okay, so now we've got the bindings done. The last thing we need to do is we need, because we have the concept of internal proximity, which is going to be running on its internal tick, and by default, this component is set to not tick. So we want to start it once all of the setup has been done. We're just going to come in here and we'll say begin spawner, and there we can now do that. All right. So this allows us to start the spawning process when we're ready to actually start it. So there could be some additional things here. So if we had a saving and loading system, most likely you'd probably be loading in the data at this point of the execution. And that way, when the spawner starts, it'll check to see if there's anything already there. And of course, once you load an existing scenario in from the save system, it'll say, nope, there's a solution already there. Then, we're just going to bypass it. Versus if we started this before we did the load sequence, then we would end up with 2 scenarios, the new scenario that it picked, as well as the loaded scenario as well. But that's right there, so we can start the whole process off when we're ready to start it off. All right, so the next thing we're going to do, because we have event triggers so we can trigger externally, let's go ahead and create an event here that can be used by an external source. So I'm going to go ahead and once again add a custom event, and I'm just going to call this trigger spawner. Good enough. Let's give it 1 parameter, and this will be table row. And I'm going to go ahead and hit name, since that's what we need to bring in. All right, so for this logic to work, and so that we can ensure that we only trigger in 1 scenario at a time, and we don't try and bring in the same scenario twice, just need to add a little extra logic to make sure that whatever we have is current stays current. So to do that, I'm just going to go ahead and do a little plus key. So I'm going to just call this last ID sent, and of course this isn't a transform, this is going to be a name, and it's going to be a single. Everything else is clear, it's internal, keep it. All right, and I'm just going to go ahead and let's grab it. So from here, I'm going to do a quick little logic check to make sure that we don't have it defined already. So that's what that's going to do. So it's going to check this check this and this, and if they're not equal, it means that we can spawn in a scenario. We're going to use a branch, which is the Blueprint's version of an if statement. So we'll do an if check on there, and if true, right, if they're not equal, then I'm just going to go grab this guy again. I'm going to set it this time to what's coming in. Just put the reroute nodes there so we can kind of see the flow, the logic flow. And then all we need to do is bring in the dynamic spawn components, and we will say look for the external function that we created on that component, and there it is. And we just hook that right in there. And that should get us going for when we want to trigger something externally. All right, so that should do it for our spawn control host. So let's go ahead and get into the map and start setting that up so that we can start spawning in scenarios. So I'm just going to move this off to the side real quick. So there's a couple of things we need to add to the map. The first, let's go ahead and put in the triggers. So from there we can come to, if you should have this place actors tab. Mine's on the side. If I open it up, I've got basic, and under basic you should have trigger box, and that's what we're going to use. So I'm just going to bring in a trigger box here, and I'm going to put the first one here between this choke point between the wall and this block. And let's go to details. I'm going to open this up, so I'm going to say 0.5. Actually no, we want 5. So I'm going to scale this out 5 so it completely seals that off. And let's go 4. Nope. Let's go 1. And let's go 4. So I'm going to put 4 height. So the blue is our height. And then we'll move that up. So there we go. There's our trigger 1. It's kind of like a little gated trigger box. And then the next one we'll put over here. Under basic, let's go to trigger box again. Drag. Yep, drag it, drop it. I'm going to go ahead and go to details. I'm going to click that, and I'm going to just say 5 across the board. I think that's big enough for a trigger. And I'm just going to put this guy at the corner out the way. So, yeah, it can be right there, a corner little trigger. Okay, so I'm going to hit save. Alright, so next, because we want to bring in AIs, and probably those AIs are going to want to start crawling around your map at some point, we're going to want to use a nav mesh. So this system is designed to work, this spawn control system is designed to work with nav mesh. So to do that, we're going to bring down, we need to come to volumes under place actors, come to volumes, and then find the nav mesh bounds volume right here. And I'm just going to drag it, drop it, and then let's go ahead and scale this out. So I'm going to come to details. Let's go ahead and just do a quick, what do we think? 15 maybe? Yeah, that's pretty big. I should cover that. But I'm going to step this down to 5. We don't need it to be too high. We just need it big enough to capture the nav area. Alright, and then I'm just going to hit the P key, and that will show where the nav mesh is covering. So I'm going to just adjust that a little bit. So as you can see, all the green areas, that's where the nav mesh is. And so when our spawn controller decides where to place something, if the nav system is being defined, it will then figure out, it will take a look at the green space and spawn in on that green space. Otherwise, if we didn't have this, then our spawner will default to the actual spawn point location and just spawn in right there. So we do have that. All right, and then one other thing, since we're using a dynamic spawn controller, so we're going to be dynamically spawning in scenarios into this nav mesh, we need to make one final configuration point, and that needs to go, so let's go to project settings, and that should bring up the project settings screen. And under engine, we're going to come down to, where is it? Should be navigation mesh. Yep, navigation mesh. And under navigation mesh, we should have this runtime drop down. And what we need to do is we need to come to runtime generation, and we need to set that from static to dynamic. So, and this is important if you're going to be spawning in dynamically a lot of AIs onto your scenery. By doing this, anytime that there's a change on the nav mesh, it will then recalculate the nav mesh for those things coming in. So we want to set that to dynamic. Otherwise, if this was static and you started spawning in there and you had AIs that were free roaming, then, and you know, if it was static, they probably would not be walking around. They would just be standing still, and you'd probably think that there's something wrong. But if you set it to dynamic, then once they come in, they should start to wander around in that area. So set that to dynamic. All right, so once that's done, I'm just going to go ahead and close that. I'm going to hit the P to take that off. All right, hit save. All right, so now that we've set that up, we've got the controllers, we've got the mesh, we've got the our little trigger boxes. Let's go ahead and bring in the spawner. So come to content drawer. I'm just going to grab the blueprint, which is our rock, and drop it right there. I'm going to put it right there. So now that we've got that there, let's go ahead and get those. Let's go ahead. First off, I'm just going to go ahead and configure the spawn controller. So we'll keep it proximity. I'm going to go ahead and make this 1500. Oops. And I'm going to go ahead and make this alright, so that should bring it in a little bit. I'm also going to go ahead and point to the table that we created so that we can then fill that in. And I'll just set debugging on as well, so we can see the debug messages come up. Alright, so once that's done, I hit save. And then I'm going to come back under details. This time I'm going to come up to the blueprints. And as you can see here, we now have custom spawn points. So let's go ahead and create our custom spawn in points using these transforms. So I'm going to start with the actor. I'm going to go create one. And as you can see, got this nice little widget thing here. So we can use that to help move our transforms around in the map to place them where we want to place them. So I'm going to place that one in maybe there. And because we have an arrow component, now we can also see which way this thing's going to look. So I can set that to there. And then we come off here. You can see there's the point, and then there's the arrow. So I'm just going to come back. And these arrow components will become invisible once we play the game. They're only there for the editor. All right, so let's create a second actor point. And I'm just going to grab you and make sure we've got the drag in. And I'm going to go ahead and move that to there. So that will give us another actor point. I want to keep it close to the ground. Oops. Yep, I think that looks good. And again, let's give it a different direction. We'll have it point that direction, why not? Hit save. So we've got two actor points, so let's go ahead and create the spawn-in points for any AIs. So that's on the pawn transforms, so I'm going to click the first one, which is our 0. I'm going to go ahead and drag that off and move that into here. Pop it up a little bit. And let's go ahead and rotate this so it's facing down the ramp and off the ramp a little bit. Okay, so that's the first one. I'm going to go ahead and add a second one. And let's have that second one. Turn the P on. So I'm going to put that second one here and just drop that down. Let's transform one. And let's add a third one. And I'm just going to move this third one. And we'll put that here. And want to rotate this. Gonna rotate that direction. And we'll rotate this one into that direction, just different rotation. I'm going to just take the nav mesh off. Alright, so there we go. We've got our transform points. We've got 3 yellows, 2 reds. And that's all set up. So now let's go ahead and hook up our spawn controller in so that it can take advantage of these trigger boxes. So to do that, I'm just going to come up to the open blueprints and I'm going to click on that. And so that will bring up the third person map. And so what we can do, I just need to make this a bit smaller because it's going to be a little tricky with one screen. So what we want to do is we want to pick our trigger box, right? So if we want to put the trigger box and have it referenced up here, we just select the trigger box, which has been instanced in the map. And then we're just going to right click on the event graph. And as you can see, here's trigger box 2. I'm going to come down to collision and I'm going to do add actor overlap. And so that will add that there. And then I'm going to do the same thing for trigger box 1. And I'm going to say collision, add overlap. And I'm just going to put that there. So now we've got the trigger boxes. And then we need a reference to our spawn host. So I'm going to select it. Going to right click and then we're going to say create a reference to blueprint, and there it is. So now I've got that, we can go ahead and start to hook this up. So alright, so here we are. I'm just going to hit save. Alright, so let's set this up. So first off, on here I'm gonna drag off the other actor and I'm going to say cast to BP third person character class. So this is us. Well, should be us. But I can also say cast to dynamic spawn controller character. So since I built this in C++, right, it actually built us a C++ character, and then it created a blueprint on top of that character class. So because we have both of them, we can use either one. If you're referencing data that is only in the blueprint, then you're going to need the blueprint. But if you're referencing data that is in the C++, then you can use the C++ or the blueprint when doing the references. So off here, we're going to find our trigger spawn, and if this is successful, we're just going to link that to there. Alright, and then I'm just going to go copy, and I'm just going to go and duplicate it. So I'm not going to reference this table row yet since we haven't created the tables. I'm just going to go ahead and just put this in here ready, and we'll come back and just add the rows into the spawn. So this is 2, this is 1. Alright, and while we're in here, I'm just going to go ahead and set up the saving and loading. and show you how to do that. So to do that, I'm going to run these off debug keys. So here's debug key 1, and I'm going to set debug key 2. So there's debug key 2. Alright, so off debug key 1, that's our save. So to do this, I'm just going to go pull, and I'm going to say create save game object, which is right here. And in part 1, we went ahead and created our save game object. So there it is, BP my save game. So that's what we're going to use. Hit save. And I can just show that right up here. So under save systems, there it is, open it up, and there's our save spawn data right there, and that's what we'll be putting the data into before we go and save it to the file system. And then when we reload it from the file system, that's what we'll pull it back from here. Alright, so there's our save file. Alright, once we've done this, we'll want to create an instance of it. So I'm just going to say promote to variable, and I'm going to call this save game. I'm going to call it save game instance. Alright, hit compile. And then off here, I'm going to say set, and there's our pawn data, or our spawn data that we want to save from our spawner. There it is. And then once it gets saved, we'll go ahead and I'm going to do an async save game to slot. So we're going to run async save game to slot, and the game we want to save is this instance right up here. And we need to give it a slot name. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a variable, call it slot name, and this needs to be a string. Hit compile, save, and I'm going to call this save game 1. So there it is. And I'm just going to go drag, get, and put the slot in there, and everything should be good. And then on complete, we'll just put a print string just to let me know that it's saved successfully, or saved. So save to slot 1. Alright, so now we need to get the data into this object. So to do that, I'm just going to copy spawn host. I'm going to paste that down here. Off here, I'm going to say get dynamic spawn components. So that's the component which is in the host. And I'm just going to say save spawn data. So this is just going to get our save spawn data, and it's just going to put it right in there. And I'm just going to hit compile and save. Alright, and then when I hit the 2 key, this is the loading sequence, so it's kind of the opposite. So first thing I'm going to do here is, since we're just doing this in the game and just doing it to test the saving and loading, I'm going to just make sure we clear out any existing spawn scenarios. So to do that, I'm just going to run the despawn. So there's our despawn current scenario. I'm just going to hook that in there first. And then once I've done that, I'm then going to go ahead and say load game from slot. I'm going to drag the slot name and put that into there. And then from here, we need to cast this out. And there's the blueprints. So we're going to cast that to our blueprints. And then from there, I'm just going to say get saved spawn data. And then off here, I'm just going to drag and say LOAD, and there's our load spawn data there, and we're just going to hook that together. Connect that to there, connect that to there. And put the reroute in. All right. So that looks good. So that's our saving and loading setup. So now let's go ahead and create some scenarios and finish off the trigger here, and then let's go ahead and let's see this thing in action. So first off, let's go ahead and open up the content drawer. I'm going to come back to spawners. This time I'm going to open up our table, and I'm just going to go ahead and just create 3 scenarios, one after another, 3 rows. I'm going to call this tables. I'm going to call that people, trees. I'm just going to grab tables, and I'm going to come back to the 3rd person map, come down here. So tables, I'm going to do off trigger box 2. Hit save, compile, and I'm going to run trees off trigger box 1. There it is. All right. Save, save. All right, so let's go ahead and fill these out. So for tables, I'm going to go ahead and bring in 2 actors components. I'm going to have tables, and that's going to reference, so we have BP tables, which is our tables and chairs, and I'm going to set that to transform 0.0. That's turned on. And then I've got trees, and we'll use trees, and I'm going to set that to spawn point 1, and I'm going to hit save. So let's see if I can, since we're looking at tables, I can probably make this a little bit smaller. So as you can see, we've got actor transform 1 there, so the trees should show up there. And we have actor transform 0, so the tables, when this scenario is called, should show up there. And then under the pawn groups, I'm just going to go ahead and put a plus, open this up. It's going to be our little wait staff, maybe. And I'm going to open this up. Be our waiter. A 1-for-1, I'm going to use BP 3rd person characters. I'm going to map to transform 0, and transform 0 on the pawns transform is right there at the top of the ramp. I'm going to take random location and random rotation off, so by doing that, that's going to tell our spawn controller to map it directly into that transform with no variance, and map it in the direction that this transform is going. So there we go. So that is our first scenario. So people, I'm not going to do actors. Instead, we're just going to do these pawn groups. So I'm going to have group 1 and group 2. Group A. And group B. So in group A, we're just going to create a crowd size. I'm going to set the pawn class, again, 3rd person characters. We'll call those the Jets. That can be anywhere between 2 and 8. We're going to map that to transform 1, which is right here. And I'm going to use random location and random rotation. Hit save. And then on the second group, right here, we're going to go hit the add key. Again, bring it down. pull in the sharks, and between, we'll say anywhere between 1 and 4. Again, we'll use the same class. I'm going to map, and this one's going to be mapped to transform 1. Actually, transform 2. My mistake. So transform 2 is right here on the map. So that's where we'll want to spawn that one in there. So I'm going to hit save. And again, we'll use random location, random rotation for that. Okay, so next we've got trees. Do something a little different here, and I'm just going to get an actor, and I'm going to call this, and I'm going to just use the trees. And I'm going to turn that off. So by turning this off, it's going to say use the rock and don't use any of the don't use the actor transforms. Well, that's what it should do. So this is going to be and we'll use a pawn group. So do that. We'll call this people, and I'm just going to go hit a plus key, and I've got group 1. I'll do a 1-for-1, and I'll map that to transform 1. So that should bring in that person here and directly on there. And I'm going to add a second to this list, and I'm going to say between 2 and 4. Let's make sure that we've got these classes defined, otherwise it won't bring in anything. And I'm going to map this to our 2 transform there. Alright, so that should be good. Let's see, for people, I think 500 might be a little too tight. I'm going to move this to 800. 800 for that. We'll keep that at 500, and we'll keep everything else the same. Alright, so those are the scenarios. That'll be the tree on rock. So I'm going to hit save. Be lots of people. And this one will be stuffing people, why not? Alright, so I'm going to hit save. I'm just going to move this over to the other side. Alright, so everything should be set up, and so when we hit play, we should be able to get our first spawn scenario. So, alright, so let's go ahead and do that. So there we are, first scenario, and that's just the rock, the tree with a rock, and some people spawned in. Just despawn out. New scenario, we've got, yeah, so we could probably need to just bring these spawn points down a little bit. They're a little bit high for the actors. You can see there's a little bit of an air gap there. Alright, but I'm going to come back out. And we'll come back in and hit the blue. Oh, rocking people again. Alright. So there's our group. Alright, so it looks like it's picking between 2 right now. There are 3 in there. So, but that's fine. Eventually, if we keep doing it enough, it would get there. So here's our actor transform. Let's make sure that we get this a little bit lower. And try and see if we can take these air gaps out. AIs don't seem to have that. AIs don't have that problem unless they're going directly onto the point. So, but oh, that one's floating in the air. If we're getting a point on a nav mesh, as you can see, it automatically just puts them onto the nav mesh. So, alright, gonna hit save. Alright, so I'm gonna switch the mode, and to do that, I'm gonna click on the instance. I'm gonna go details, click on here, and we'll go to external, and I'm gonna hit run again. As you can see, nothing came in. So let's go ahead to the trigger box. Alright, there's our tree. And there's our tree on rock. With our people over in the corner. So let's see if we can get that other one to spawn real quick. We'll try an external first. So we'll do that, hit save. Oh, there it is, first one in. And there's our tons of people spawning in and unspawning when I move out. And then we're back into that again. And then if we want to check out saving and loading, I'm just going to go ahead and press the 1 key. That'll save it. I'm just going to come on out. It'll despawn. If I hit the 2 key, it will respawn it. And it shouldn't respawn another one in there, because it's saying that one's already in play until I come out, and they'll despawn it. Alright, so that is it. Okay, so that will do it for this video in the series on creating a data-driven and dynamic spawn controller. If you like what I'm doing, feel free to like and share my videos, as well as subscribe to my channel. And I will see you in the next video. Cheers. Bye.